bad addict. Every time I was able to get a loan, I was doing drugs.
I've been to prison 4 times, twice in the state, twice in the fed.
I was doing all this crazy stuff, cooking drugs and just staying high.
God called me from a prison cell. I was a homeless drug addict, and my hope was found in a needle.
I was 8 months pregnant, homeless, living out of my van.
You know, it wasn't Freeway that saved me, it wasn't John Stroup that saved me, but God uses Freeway in such a mighty way as a tool to reach these people.
There's not a community or a county in America that doesn't have a drug problem. And the church has the answer, and it's the gospel of Jesus Christ. Welcome to One Broken Life. I have a guest with me today, a very good friend of mine. It's been an honor to know him and work alongside him. His name is Mike Simons. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you.
I just want to let you know Freeway Ministries is a production. One Broken Life is a production of Freeway Ministries. We're taking a unique look at people's lives and challenging our audience and just exploring what God can do through one broken life. The transformation of those people who have been redeemed from the pit and the mire. The bigger the mess, I believe sometimes the bigger the message. And so we came up with the idea of doing this. One broken life at a time is kind of our theme, reaching one broken life at a time at Freeway Ministries. And so we thought, well, why don't we share these stories with people? You hear about the negative impact that drugs and crime, which go together, make on our communities. I believe it's domestic terrorism. Drug addiction, drug dealing in our cities and counties. And so what you don't hear about is the positive impact one radically changed ex-drug addict or ex-convict makes on our community, that the gospel has penetrated their heart. And so today I have Mike Simons here with me today. How old are you, Mike?
I'm 54.
54 years old. How long had you been using substances, drugs, alcohol?
About 38 years.
38 years of drug addiction.
Yes.
You'd say that you were chained up by it.
Absolutely.
For 38 years. One of the theme verses, Mike, for this podcast is Psalms 51:17. And the psalmist is talking about the sacrifices to God. David is repenting from his sin. This is kind of a confession psalm, a repentant psalm. And he says the sacrifices of God, the sacrifices of God, Psalms 51:17, are a broken spirit, a broken and contrite heart, O God, these you will not despise. Psalms 51:17. And then Philippians chapter 1, verse 12 says, I want you to know, brethren, the things which have happened to me have actually turned out for the furtherance of the gospel, to make the gospel go further, taking it places it hasn't been before. And I believe that's what this podcast and our ministries has been doing and has done and will do, as long as we continue to put God first and not get in his way or steal his glory from him. And so I asked you to come on this podcast today, Mike, because you have had an extensive background of crime and addiction. Your life was broken. It was a mess. I met you back then at one point in your BC, your before Christ life, when you were still struggling with addiction, and now you're here today, a staff member, ministry leader, and 38 years of addiction. I'll just tell you, Mike, most people don't make it back from that. Statistically, you are a cycle breaker to be able to have that much clean time, and we're going to kind of get into that and what God has done in your life. So why don't you share for those folks who are watching, what was life like growing up for Mike Simons?
You know, I hear about a lot of people that struggle with addiction through their lives that have a bad family background with their parents, maybe struggle with addictions, things like that. But my story's not that case. I can't blame anything that happened to me or the way that I turned out from my childhood. My parents were very loving, caring parents. They always took care of me and my sisters. We always had what we needed. They always made sure that we, that school was a priority, and we just always had what we needed. And they didn't. I never seen drugs and alcohol in the house at all. So I was just a rebellious young man from the very start, and I think maybe some of it stemmed from the fact that my parents were so strict. I didn't get away with anything, and so I would become angry, over discipline and just rebel against authority from a young age. So
Okay. And so you were the rebel,
yes,
and you're the only boy.
yes,
2 sisters?
2 sisters.
So what about your parents? What was that like? What was your childhood like with parental figures? Did you go to church? Were you raised in church? Was the gospel? Did your parents have a biblical worldview? Did they live that out in your home? What was that like?
We didn't go to church when I was young. I don't ever recall going to church with my parents. But they were, oddly enough, they lived what appeared to be a godly life. They were dedicated to each other and to their marriage and to us kids. And it wasn't proper to use bad language, especially around women. You respected your parents, your mom. They just raised us up in what you would think would be a godly family, but it was just lacking the gospel. I didn't hear the gospel whenever I was young, or I wasn't taken to church or anything like that.
So the gospel, the fact that God in the flesh came and lived a sinless life, and he died on a cross for our sins, and we can only be saved through him. And we trust in his sacrifice alone and in his resurrection from the dead. And so you never heard the truth of Jesus, faith in Jesus. It wasn't in your home. It was a good moral home.
It was. I heard the gospel growing up. I couldn't tell you how many times I've heard it, but I never was open to it. I never let it in. I never stopped and really put any time into thinking about who Jesus was or what he did on the cross.
So this young man who had everything in life he wanted growing up, pretty much, right?
Yes.
Had all the advantages. So you are rebelling against, your mom and your dad and your family and your upbringing. You're going the opposite direction, acting like a lost man, because that's what lost people do, right? Regardless of the severity of the rebellion, they're rebelling against God. And so then you become someone who starts drinking, drugging. How'd that start?
Well, as a young man and growing up in a strict family like that, where my parents were very strict, at a young age, I experienced that adrenaline from getting away with stuff. So I think that's where the rebellion started. Is that, I would get there was that fear and that adrenaline of getting caught by my parents, and so it was something at a young age I was attracted to. I smoked pot the first time when I was 8 years old with some older kids, and wasn't too fond of it, of what it did to me. And but it wasn't until I was probably 13 or so that I started doing it regularly.
Okay. So you started using marijuana on a regular basis at 13?
Yes.
And then, so marijuana is a drug. I believe that. A drug is a drug. But
Yep.
marijuana isn't what sent you into a face-first fall to the pavement.
Right.
So what happened next?
Well, alcohol. I drank. The first time I ever got drunk, I was 13 years old. I got drunk with a neighbor, and we drank. At 13 years old, I drank. Me and another older kid, we drank 2/5 of some kind of whiskey that was in my parents' liquor cabinet, and at 13, first thing in the morning, hadn't had anything to eat, and so needless to say, I was in a blackout. Almost died in that whole experience. But that set the pace. I mean, that's how I would use drugs and alcohol throughout my life. Was I would just take it to the extreme, drink myself into a blackout, I often did blacked out on just about anything that I did, whether it was meth or there's times when I blacked out on meth. I would black out on whatever it was I was doing because I just would overdo it. I'd go to the extreme with it.
Yeah. So what happened to that relationship with your parents? I mean, your mom, your dad, your siblings. Here you are. You're drinking. You're drugging. You go from marijuana to alcohol. Then when did all the other stuff come into play, and how'd that happen?
Well, I was very angry behind closed doors. I didn't show that to my parents. I attempted to run away from home more than once, which didn't work out for me. My father wasn't one to let stuff like that go. So I just, I started having these ideas that I didn't want to be there anymore, very young. Like I said, I attempted to run away, and then I met my first wife while I was in high school, and we decided to get married. And in the back of my mind, it was what was going to get me away from my parents, out of that home where I could do what I wanted, and I didn't have all the discipline and the rules, and so I got married when I was 17, still in high school.
Okay.
And I'll admit it, part of that was to get out of the house.
So you're married, you're 17 years old, you're an immature kid,
Yep.
You have an addiction, you marry this girl, then what?
Well, it was bad from the very start. There was back in that time, there was I don't know what kids and what people do today, teenagers or whatever, but back then we had parties about every weekend, and either at a low water bridge or at an old rock quarry or just somewhere out on a gravel road. There would literally be hundreds of people would gather every single weekend, and for me, that was just, I was having the time of my life at the time, just partying. It was partying, had not a worry in the world. My wife got pregnant with my son, and, I remember not being able to not go to the parties. I still hadn't identified that I had a problem. Even so, I left my wife out in the country, 9 months pregnant, having labor pains, with no vehicle and no phone. And she begged me to stay there. But there was a party that was going on. It was the biggest party of the year, and I had to be there. And so I would assure her that I would come back and check on her. And I remember her just falling to pieces, just crying, scared when I left, and me telling her I would be back, and just not going back, So
Yeah, and that's a memory that you probably can't get rid of.
no, I'll always have that memory.
Yeah, and that's part of addiction. I tell guys and gals that come out of a past like ours, because there's a lot more to it than what you're telling me right now. It gets deeper and darker, and there's a lot more shame and guilt behind that. But that's why we need to live holy lives more than someone who has a, and I don't mean to be funny or nothing, but where you're saved at a young age and you don't go through those things, God keeps you from it, which is a powerful testimony of grace, in my opinion, as powerful as yours or mine or more. But, the things that people say about us from back before we got saved are mostly true. So we need to live a holy life today to honor God more than anyone, because we've got all that junk from the past weighing over our heads, and that guilt and that shame from those things will eat you up and tear you apart if you don't have salvation, if you don't have a way to give those to Jesus, if you don't know that that's covered by the blood of Christ and that you are a Christian today and you are forgiven for those things. But so you're leaving your wife, she's alone, then she has your son. Where are we at right now in life, in Mike's life, with that? Where are you? Are you still with her? Are you together?
So we have my son, and it's like the absolute highlight of my life. I'd never experienced anything of that magnitude when it comes to just joy. I just remember being just overwhelmingly happy, about my son, And so I actually didn't think that anything was wrong, that I was in danger of, losing my wife or my son. But ultimately, that's what happened. After about 2 months, he was there. He was about 2 months old when she finally got him out of the situation. And I remember her telling me, you can go do whatever you want, 3 weekends out of the month, but I need you here one weekend. So you can have 3, just give me and the baby 1. And so I thought that was a pretty good deal. It sounded like something I would be able to do, and I couldn't do it. The first time that it was my weekend to be there, of course there was a big party going on, and I just had to be there. So I remember telling her, well, why don't we just wait? I'll go to bed with you and we'll wait till you go to sleep. And once you go to sleep, I'll get up and I'll go to the party and I'll be back before you get up, And she wasn't having it, she wasn't having it at all. And so I just left, went to the party and just did what I wanted. And I remember her telling me, when we first got together that, she needed me. She couldn't live without me. And so I ran with that. I thought that she couldn't live without me. And so I used that as I used that, and she finally did what she needed to do. She got our child out of a situation, out of a dangerous situation, and she didn't look back, and she ended up raising our child on her own. So.
And your son, how old is he?
He's I don't want to get in trouble here. I'm pretty sure he's 34.
Okay.
But he may have turned 35 this year.
So I know the flip side of this is a good ending. But when we first met, when you first entered the Freeway Ministries program, one of the things that troubled you was your son wouldn't talk to you and didn't want anything to do with you anymore.
Yeah.
But God flipped that around, didn't he?
Yeah, he did.
We're not going to get into that just yet. This is part 1.
Okay.
But I want to continue. We'll talk about that a little bit. So your wife has left you. You can't say no to the party. You can't say no to the quote-unquote good time. Your friends and the alcohol and the drugs and all that is before anything, really, which is an idol in your life. You were practicing idolatry. And so you may not have figured out you had a problem, but so now your wife leaves. She leaves you, right?
Yes.
So how did that happen? Because this is the beginning of the brokenness. This is where life begins to get, we teach in our classes at Freeway Ministries the point of decision. And at the point of decision, we have a choice. We can honor God or honor self. Every single thing we do all day long, from the moment you get up to the moment you go to sleep, you encounter the point of decision all day long. And at first, it's hard to honor God, but at the point of decision. But later, it's hard at first, but later it gets easy. And at first, it's easy to honor self, but later it gets hard at the point of decision. So it's easy for you to go to the party and leave your wife and your 2-month-old baby. It's easy at first. Didn't take no discipline. You didn't have to practice. You didn't have to do push-ups. You didn't have to read a book about it. You just did it. It was easy. You were pleasing self. So now later, here we go. She's had enough. It's not so easy anymore.
Right.
So tell us about that.
Well, I was, like I said, I was married when I was 17 and divorced when I was 20. So she hung in there for 3 years, and it was 3 years of nonstop. I was young. I was not ready to take on what I took on, but I thought I was. I thought I knew what I was doing. She was my high school sweetheart. And so when she decided to leave, when she decided to take our child and get him out of a dangerous situation, it didn't set in for a while. I thought that she would be back. I thought that she had to have, she couldn't live without me. And it turns out she could. And I remember being devastated. I mean, devastated like I had never experienced in my life. I literally had a breakdown, and I couldn't function, and I couldn't picture my life without her. and my son, and they were gone. She took them and she moved plumb away, where I couldn't even see them. And so that at that point, that was the first time that I started using to escape just feelings of just doom and gloom. It was like I said, I was having a hard time even functioning, and so that's when methamphetamine come into my life. I had tried methamphetamine before, but that's when my methamphetamine use took off and became an everyday thing.
Yeah, there's a saying, and the Alcoholics Anonymous, and it's one's never enough and two's too many, and so you keep looking for that number, that first high, and you never find it again, and it's the first thing you think about when you go to sleep, last thing you think about when you go to sleep, and it's the first thing you think about when you wake up, is that shame and that guilt and that pain. And there's nothing else can numb it except for that, whatever it is that you need, that fix you got, that addiction, whether it's alcohol, whether it's opiates, whether it's cocaine or methamphetamines or whatever the case may be. And I believe that is, we tell folks all the time, drug addiction isn't the problem. Addiction is what you see. So we got to get to the problem. And once you give it the problem, the heart issue, the addiction gets dealt with. So you had a heart problem, Mike, right?
Yeah.
And so now you're on meth. How old are you?
I am 20 years old at this point.
Okay. 20 years old. I know your mom and your sisters, and they're super sweet people who love you very much. So before we kind of go into this, let me just ask you just a few questions, and there's so much we could talk about right now. My mind's going crazy, but so I'm just trying to picture you. You're 20 years old. You're in pain. You're using meth. How are you using it? Are you injecting it? Are you eating it? Are you smoking it? How are you doing it?
At that point, I'm not injecting it yet in my life. I'm eating it, smoking it, snorting it. I'm doing it every which way, but I was totally against the needle at that point in my life.
Okay. And so where's your mom at right now during this? Where's your parents? Where's your father? What's going on there?
My mom is, she is, at that point, she is starting to deal with my father, his father had died, and my father wasn't dealing with that very well. And I think he was bottling it up, but it started affecting him, and it started affecting their marriage. And all three of his kids were out of the house by this time. And my dad, he started struggling with depression and anxiety. And so he started, I remember there were times when he would go in, they would admit him into the Marion Center. I remember them doing shock treatments on him, having him on all different kinds of antidepressants and drugs, and he just lost all motivation. He got to where he didn't want to work. He didn't want to do anything. He was depressed all the time, and my mom had about enough at one point, and she filed for divorce. At that point I got a phone call one night, and my dad was holding my mom hostage with a .30-06 in the house. She had told him she wanted a divorce, and he lost it at that point. Held her hostage for 24 hours with a high-powered rifle, finally let her go. He was picked up and arrested. And so they had their struggles of their own, and while I was, off in my addiction. I was lost. I was empty inside and alone. I remember feeling that, and when I would get high, that would go away. It would be gone. And but when I would come down, it would be back. And that same empty feeling, that lostness would be there. And so I developed what I thought was a wonderful ability, and that was to just shut shut my feelings off like a switch, like a light switch. I could just shut them off.
Me too.
And I didn't have to feel anything that I didn't want to feel. I just made a decision, and I thought that was pretty genius of me to be able to do that. And so I kind of took a little bit of pride in that. But what I was doing was I was hardening my heart. I had found a way to just stuff my feelings and not dealing with them. So in the meantime, my dad's arrested. I had actually gotten clean at this point. Kind of missed a little period there where my best friend growing up, when we had started doing methamphetamine when I was 20, we kind of went all in on it, and we were definitely everyday users. We were dealing it large amounts. We were connected to someone that was bringing it out of Texas, and we were all about it. And he ended up committing suicide. I remember we had a little trailer in Pleasant Hope, Missouri, and we both worked night shift. We were both diesel mechanics, and we were splitting the rent on this little trailer, little small trailer, $60 a month. So we paid $30 a piece per month for rent. And we were home one night, and he had a little stub nose .38 pistol, and he looked at me and started talking about how crazy that we were, and I agreed that we were crazy, and so he put a shell in this .38 revolver, and he spun the barrel on it and stuck it up to his temple, and he pulled the trigger, and it just snapped. So he handed it to me, and I looked at the pistol and went ahead and put it up to my temple, and I just remember squeezing my eyes shut and pulled the trigger, and it snapped. And so I handed it back to him, and at this point it was really setting in. I knew we really were crazy, not in a good way, not in a bragging good way. We were, I think we were insane at that point. We were out there so far on meth that we didn't realize what we were doing. And so he stuck it straight to his head and pulled the trigger without any hesitation whatsoever. And it clicked again. He handed it back to me, and I stuck it to my forehead, and I really didn't want to pull the trigger. I remember putting pressure on the trigger, and I dropped it down and said, that's crazy. We can't do that. And I can't do that. One more pull. And we just laid the pistol down after that. And 1 week later, he got in a fight with his girlfriend, and he stuck it to his forehead just to tell her, just to kind of scare her. And he said, I will, and it went off. And so I kind of realized at that point that if I'd have pulled 1 week earlier, I wouldn't be here today. So that's kind of where we were at in our drug use. And meanwhile, while this is going on, my mom is, she's needing me. She's needing support from me. She's needing me to be there for her, and I wasn't. I couldn't be there for her because of my addiction. And so my dad got out of jail after being locked up, and he called me one day. I was at work in Springfield, and he wanted me to come get him. And he was in Polk County, and they were letting him out. And I explained to him that I couldn't do that. I'm at work. There's many other people that can pick you up. They're just, minutes away from you. I can't drive all the way home, all the way from Springfield and come. And so he hung up the phone. He was upset at me, hung up the phone. And later on that evening is when he committed suicide. He stuck a .270 underneath his chin, and while he had my mom on the phone, and pretty much decapitated himself. And that was just an excuse for me. I had been clean for a while at that point, and I used that as an excuse to go back out and start drinking and drugging again, worse than ever. So yeah, I've had a history my whole life of taking these life events, these trials, and just using them as an excuse to even go deeper into my addiction.
So that's a lot of trauma.
Yeah.
When it comes down to it. You could go to a psychiatrist and get any kind of drug you want if you tell them that story, but so here you are, and you are back in addiction. And so what's the next thing that happened in your life as we talk about your journey to brokenness? So what happens after this, Mike? Where are you at? How do you come to the place of brokenness? Because I don't want to steal your thunder from you, but you came to a place where you were injecting methamphetamines.
Yes.
So your buddy's dead, kills himself. Your dad's dead, kills himself. You are grieving with meth and alcohol. What's next? What happens?
Well, I've been through. I lost count at 15. It's my life of addiction is kind of a blur, but I can account for at least 15 different inpatient treatment centers that I've went through, drug and alcohol treatment centers, and I completed every one of them. I never walked out on any of them. I made it all the way through, and usually I would be head of the group, and I would graduate, and I'd have all these good intentions. I'm going to do things different this time, and I'm not going to drink, I'm not going to drug anymore, and I'd have all these good intentions, and I would always fall back. I would always go right back to where it was. Usually within 30 days, I was back to using and drinking again, and I look back at that, and I always had a hard time letting go of the people that I used with and grew up with. Those were the only people that I had. Everyone else I had abandoned. I had abandoned my family. I wouldn't go around my family while I was using, and they wouldn't hear from me for months. And so the people that I used with were my family. And so we continuously would convince each other that I'll take a bullet for you. I got your back. I'll do whatever it takes. You can count on me, brother.
The buddy hustle.
At the time, I thought it was true, and I, these relationships that I had, I thought were strong relationships. I thought that these were my best friends. Some of them were people that I went to school with from whenever I was young, and we played sports, and we weren't even into drugs, and then we got into it later on. And so these were valuable relationships to me, and I always had a problem letting go. I would always go back around them with this idea that, I'm not going to drink or drug. I just want to go by and say, hey, what's up? How are you doing? And I'd go back around them. They'd be drinking or drugging, and it might last I might be able to do it one or two times, but it didn't, it didn't take long before I was convinced that, I even had one friend tell me one time, he's like, that's what you do. You're a drug addict. You get high. That's what you do. It's okay. And so I used it. I ran with it. It's like, it's what I do. That's who I am. And so, through all the drug and alcohol treatments, it was like a revolving door. I did the same thing throughout my life, just over and over and over. And so I knew, I was introduced to God at a young age, probably early in my addiction. And so I would grab a hold of enough of the idea to get me out of the situation. And then, but I never did surrender my life to Christ. I never did take any effort in reading my Bible and knowing who he was. I just used him to get myself out of a bind, and then I was right back to doing the same thing.
So you come from this good home, marijuana, alcohol, marriage, you mess that up, you lose your dad, you lose your buddy. And so from your personal experience, I know for a fact that you got to the point where you were injecting meth in your jugular veins, in your neck. Yeah. And your girlfriend was doing the same thing, right?
Yes.
You meet this girl, and now you come from the point of just smoking marijuana at 8 years old to IV jugular. In your neck, you're shooting meth up, and then she dies, right?
Yes.
And then there's another person that's dead in your life. And so you end up, how many times you been to prison, Mike?
5 times.
5 times. How much time have you done in prison?
All total together, probably 5 years, 6 years, 5, 6 years.
So you keep going back again for violating your parole?
Yeah, I go in, I get out.
You can't make it out on the street?
No.
Because you keep getting high and you keep using drugs and you keep violating your probation and parole, right?
Right.
So when I met you, you were in a program. And we're not going to mention, we don't mention program names in here because I don't want to belittle anyone or talk bad about any recovery group. But you are in a program, and I meet you, and you want to volunteer up here, right?
Right.
Because you have an injury in your arm that you get disability for that, which you might be working your way off of that here real soon, and but so you lose your capability, use your hand fully, and you wanted to volunteer. So what's different, Mike? Where were you at in that point in your life?
At that point, you had mentioned my girlfriend that had died, and it was another point in my life where I was just completely devastated on a whole nother, on just a new level. I mean, it was just total devastation. She was 38 years old, and I was married at the time. My wife's in prison, so now I have a girlfriend while she's in prison, and we would shoot meth, and I'm tracked up from between my toes all the way up both legs.
What's tracked up? There's somebody listening that doesn't understand what that means.
I've shot meth. I would find a place where I could hit a vein, and I would hit it until it would collapse or would just go away, and I couldn't get it in anymore. And then I'd have to move to a new spot. And so I started. I didn't start between down on my feet. That came later. But once my arms, I couldn't get it in the arms anymore. Then I went to the legs. And once I couldn't get in the legs anymore, I went to the feet. And once I couldn't get in the feet anymore, I went to the jugular vein. And so we were at that point, both of us. We couldn't find a vein anywhere, and so we would sit around for hours trying to get a vein. And we had a guy come over one night, and he had just hit somebody in the neck with a shot, and I was always afraid of it, but I started asking questions about it. I'm like, is it dangerous? He's like, oh, no. He said, I've done it. I just done it, not too long ago. And I said, well, could you hit me like that? And he's like, sure, lay down on the bed and turn your head to the side. And I remember him kneeling down there, and I remember him touching me, but he stood right back up. And I'm like, well, what's the matter? And he said, nothing, it's done. And then it hit me, and I was like, this is it. I'm on to something new here. This is what I've been looking for. And but what happened, my body was in such a state of just trying to survive and protect itself that it didn't last very long. I don't know if it's a tendon or something crossed over that spot, but it didn't last. My body protected itself and shut that place off quick too. But we were persistent. We hung in there. I even remember a time when I screwed these boards to the ceiling and mounted these anchors in the ceiling and made this deal so I could hang upside down, and so somebody could try to hit me in the neck, because once the neck started going away, it was like I was willing. I had to do whatever it took to continue on with that, and so I would hang upside down and have somebody try to hit me in the neck, and finally it just got to where it just wouldn't happen, and then she died. We had been doing that. Nothing was ever said that's what it was from, and she didn't die from a shot of dope. She died after we had come down. But there's just trauma to the veins in your neck can cause what happened to her, and so it was just I was devastated once again. I remember thinking that I would never do meth ever again in my life. He had taken something from me that I just couldn't. I was having a hard time dealing with it. And I remember the day of her funeral just being an absolute mess. And I remember people, the people that are friends, I remember them smoking pot right outside the church door on the church step. And as soon as the funeral was over, we were back at my house, and I was getting high the day, within an hour after the funeral, I was getting high and justifying it once again. And so, yeah, it's
So here you are, a broken man, and you would say clearly that you're broken. You're a mess. Your life has nothing, you have nothing to show for your life. People are dying all around you. Did you ever think that you'd be a preacher?
Oh, no.
Okay. Were you happy?
No.
Did you have peace?
No.
Okay. So this is part one. And so I know today it's a miracle that I get to look at you right now, and you're still alive, right? And not only are you alive, you're not surviving. You're living a victorious life. And we're going to talk about the victorious life. We're going to talk about, now we talk about the broken man. We could keep going, but we're over time. And so for sake of time, we're going to end part one. If you've enjoyed this podcast, would you share this podcast on Facebook? Freeway Ministries is our Facebook page. Join our Facebook page. One Broken Life podcast. Check us out. If you want to know more about Freeway Ministries, go to Freeway Ministries, freeway-ministries.com. We're committed to reaching the hard to reach, one broken life at a time. Mike here, a felon, a criminal commits 100 crimes minimum in their life. Mike was committing crimes. Mike was selling drugs. And through the ministry, God has saved Mike and redeemed him to the point to where he is a preacher at a Freeway. We're going to talk about that next episode. So we're very grateful. If you would like to support us financially, you could send a check to P.O. Box, Springfield, Missouri, Freeway Ministries, P.O. Box 8655, Springfield, Missouri 65803. Or you can give online through our website at freeway-ministries.com. So thank you for those who are watching. Like, share with a friend who's struggling. We'll see you back soon, one broken life at a time. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, John.